All right, welcome to another episode of Fatboy FadeAway Sports. Casey Breyer with me, episode 63, November 28th here. Just had Thanksgiving week. Case, a little bit of a different podcast today. No Tyler today, but we're going to have a special guest here on today. We're big NBA fans here and big Warriors fans and a team that's not very far away from us, the Sacramento Kings. They have a lot of question marks going around them right now. They're always a team that me and you always pay a little bit of attention to. So we're going to have Tom Witt, writer for Outside, Overtime Heroics, does writes for the Kings there. So we're gonna have him on. We're gonna talk a little Sacramento Kings basketball here, maybe get into some other NBA questions and maybe pick his brain on even maybe the Niners a little bit. I hear he's a Niners fan there, so obviously Tyler's not there to to really poke the bear, but I'm looking forward to having him on there.
Yeah, it should be a blast, man. Anytime you can get some different knowledge about, other teams or someone else's favorite teams or just the NBA in general, it's pretty cool, just to kind of get the broad spectrum of how everyone else thinks.
And maybe we can also get pick his brain on the best restaurant out there in the area. Obviously, we have a sister that lives out there too, so maybe she has a similar. Maybe they're familiar with the same restaurant there. So, anyways, we'll have Tom Witt on here in a little bit. We'll get his takes on Sacramento Kings and maybe get his takes on a little bit of a Warriors Kings maybe rivalry anytime down the future. And can they ever meet in the playoffs? That would be the key. So we'll be back with Tom Witt here on the Fatboy FadeAway Sports Podcast. All right, we're back here on the Fatboy FadeAway Sports Podcast. And as you can see, we have a special guest up here, Tom Witt, writer for Overtime Heroics, writes for, let's see what team that is. Yeah, that's the Kings, of course, the Sacramento Kings. He's also a good follow over at Twitter at Sactown Crown. That's where I kind of started following you out there. And I just found it found your tweets very entertaining and I've always kind of just liked the Kings a little bit here. There's kind of they're only like an hour and a half away from us. We try to check out a game every year or something like that up there. And so not my favorite team, of course, but I always kind of find them very interesting. Always watching them. They're always one of my top NBA League Pass teams. So, and I really like your passion for the Kings. That's the part I like the most. So I'm curious to get your takes on them right away. But where are you at? You said right now before we got on, you're near Auburn, that area near Sacramento.
Yeah. Welcome. Thanks for welcoming me in, guys. I'm in Granite Bay right now, kind of in between Sacramento and Auburn, a little old town kind of near Folsom Lake, actually where some Kings players used to live in a little nicer neighborhood around here. I'm house sitting my junior college cross country coach's house right now.
Okay.
So while he's in Hawaii, I'm utilizing the nice digs right here.
They got to take advantage of it. Are you on your profile? Do you go to Chico State? Are you still there? Where are you at that with Chico?
Yeah, it's tough to describe things in 140 characters sometimes. I graduated from Chico State. I used to go there. I got my bachelor's, my master's there in kinesiology.
Nice.
Was living there for 10 years or so, 2010 until last February. Loved it up there. Have you guys ever been to Chico?
Yeah, we used to have our family used to own property up there when we were younger, and we used to go up there a few times. So it gets hot up there.
It does. It gets hot. It gets cold too. But it's a beautiful place. Yeah, I started out as a team manager for the basketball team there, the men's basketball team.
Okay, nice.
And worked with that, sweeping floors, being the first person to get over to a little sweat spill and gain some brownie points with the coach, and then worked up during my master's degree to be an intern for the strength conditioning. I was the head coach for that for a couple of years, so that was an awesome experience. Just another great thing in basketball. So
okay, so you did the. So Chico State, is that what right? Chico State, the basketball team?
Yeah, Chico State. Yeah, we were D2.
Okay.
Had a pretty successful program up there. So little side tangent, but I always like to shout them out. So.
And what's the mascot? I always like to get the mascots name.
Oh, the Wildcats, baby. Chico State Wildcats. # Chico, baby.
How many Wildcats are there? You add Chico to the list. I didn't know.
Never seen a wildcat. Never seen a wildcat in my entire life. Maybe should be like the Chico deer. If you're
Yeah.
golfing on Bidwell Golf Course up there, they're pretty. They know that's a safe space, so
Oh,
you
that would-
literally there's huge bucks. You're just teeing off right over and walking past them.
We
So
have Casey, we have a buddy, Jimmy, that probably knows that golf course very well.
Sure, all too well.
all dog leg lefts. Not a good course if you're a right hand slicer.
That helps me. I'm left-handed. That helps me with it.
I play with my left hand buddy.
So let's get into why we kind of had you on here a little bit. We wanted to kind of deep dive on the Kings here. Before we really dive deep into the Kings and some of the Walton stuff, curious to kind of get your thoughts on how you became a Kings fan. I always like to kind of get that perspective from people. Like, was there a player that stuck out? Your dad was how did you become a Kings fan in general?
Yeah, honestly, when I was a kid, I grew up in the mountains in kind of near Lake Tahoe-ish in Amador County, Pioneer, near Kirkwood Ski Resort is kind of a place where people know.
Yeah.
I started off watching basketball, watching WGN and Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. And it was a great time. I was born in 89, I'm 32. So the last few years of the Bulls dynasty was honestly, when I start remembering life. Whereas I'm a Niners fan, I don't really remember. I was alive for the Super Bowls and Deion Sanders and that, but I don't remember that. I was 4.
Yeah.
But so I started off basketball on that. And then my dad is from Sacramento. Honestly, I got a Kings Kids Club flyer in the Sacramento Bee, right as I think it was 96, 97. Went to a couple games for free and got hooked, man.
Nice.
It was a great experience out at Arco. It was back in the times when you could still go down to the the player or the court level before the game if you got there early enough, and those big guys love coming over to little kids and making their day. My grandpa was a basketball player growing up in Berkeley and USF. He went there and played some frosh basketball, and he was a basketball coach for forever. And he really got me into basketball when I was a kid. Hand in the cookie jar out there. But I fell in love with the Kings honestly, just by going to games, watching them, local flair. My dad went to high school with former Kings strength and conditioning coach Al Bianconi. Whenever I asked him, "Who's the most famous person you know, Dad?" "Oh yeah, Al Bianconi." And so just a few little things.
Everybody does know the strength and conditioning coach, though. Everybody does. Everybody does. Even the players.
In the local Sactown, he's actually been on a couple times. There's some passionate Sacramento Kings fans out there that call them the radio shows. People talking this and that, and so they called up the former strength coach and he set some people straight on a couple radio shows recently. But the player that really I fell in love with for the Kings growing up was Gerald Wallace. I think he was drafted in. I wrote an article about it. I should know this a little bit better.
I think it was 01.
I think it was 01. Yeah. I loved watching him, whether it was the Kings blowout because they were really good then. He would only come in the last 2 or 3 minutes right around bedtime usually. And man, I loved Gerald Wallace, watching him fly high. He was also a pretty well-rounded player, as it showed later in his career, which is a good kind of shows
the Kings never played him. The Kings never.
I know, man.
If you look at They never played
they
him.
gave him up in the expansion draft because they were so deep at that time. They were like, "Oh, we got Peja, it'll be all good." And then Chris
that's what
Webber
they needed going forward there. That's what they need to go.
They did.
Gerald Wallace always stands out to me because of Jay Rich being in the dunk contest.
He did. That was a great dunk contest all time. Gerald Wallace, one of the greatest Charlotte Bobcats of all time.
Yes. How could we forget that franchise there for sure?
Exactly.
That's funny, Gerald Wallace. Yeah, he's kind of one of those players that my kids will never know about, probably.
Right. Well, hey, send him my article. I did a deep dive on him. So
that sounds good. I will read that.
Yeah.
I read a lot of your articles, and I'm curious. One more last question before we go into it. When you're talking about writing, I give you a little bit of credit here. I saw that you were writing for Overtime Heroics, probably when I first started following you, and I was like, what is it? I kind of was interested in, just kind of followed along. And I'm interested in baseball. And eventually, long story short, as I reached out to the baseball side of Overtime Heroics, and I wrote an article for the A's on their platform. A lot of it giving, based on just kind of seeing you honestly saw it on there, read a few of your articles, liked it. And, but I'll be honest, the thing that was really hard for me, and it's hard for me to keep up with, is the deadlines, the amount of writing, just even 3 a month, which isn't that much, right? And it's not it's still you have to come up with the material. You write one, you got to have the other one ready to go. I'm very impressed with the way you're able to kind of get that stuff out. and just get the content. What's the biggest challenge for you as a writer in that point?
Yeah, man, you really hit on it right there. It's like if you get some motivation for like 2 or 3 days, and maybe there's not a game or whatnot, there's nothing to write about. Maybe you think about something to write about, but then you can go like, work comes up, friends, family, or whatever. You go like 5 or 6 days without writing an article, and then it turns out to be the 22nd of the month, and you're like, damn, I got 2 more articles to write. And then what I kind of think about is I don't want to just push out articles to publish something because it's going to be out there forever,
Yeah.
And so it's just a balance. I feel like I try to kind of work smarter, not harder. And since I'm not, I don't get paid really anything, maybe a little bit depending on how many views we get per month. That's also hard to track. So I try and do, maybe if I need to get out an article, I will like do a game recap or something a little bit shorter. But a lot of the times when I get some like motivation, I won't like finish one article, or I won't like start and finish one article without starting other articles. I'll kind of like do some rough drafts for other things. So that way I have some stuff in the bank, quote unquote, to like come back to later and then like publish it instead of like starting a whole new one. So it's kind of, I've definitely learned as time goes on. But then also too, I don't kill myself if I don't get those 3 in. I just communicate with the editors, and it's usually gone over pretty well. So Overtime Heroics they've been awesome. One of my friends, he works for the Giants, and they asked him to write for them, and he couldn't. And then he saw that I was writing, so he gave me their contact. So that's cool. You wrote an A's article. You should definitely do that more often.
Yeah. I got 3 kids too, so that's the challenge with that. They're all
Nice.
9 between 9 and 2. So it's a tough challenge there. And then but you're right. It does that. I just realized, I was like, man, I have a lot more respect for these people that write like 2 columns a week, or, just like, I don't know, just to be able to write that and like not, just be able to have the freedom for that and be able to, the skill to do that is a lot harder. Let's just put it that way. A lot more respect for it. So,
I appreciate it.
yeah. So speaking of your last article here, which was about Mr. Walton getting the hand, let's go there with the Kings. I feel like it was a long time coming. It felt like it wasn't all his fault though. And then when he got fired, I listened to a few podcasts. There was this Locked On Kings podcast. I listened to a few others. And I listened to a couple of local radio shows just to get their opinion on it. And it just seemed like people were putting, or the fans anyways, were putting a lot of pressure on the players too. And then the ownership seems like they're also getting a lot more heat. Where do you fall in the Walton firing?
I think it was a necessary firing. I don't really fault Coach Walton really for a majority of the Kings' non-success. I think it kind of falls on the ownership. You can't really a little bit more so, but people also put a little bit too much blame on them as well. They did Vivek did save the Kings from going to Seattle or Anaheim or Virginia Beach back in like 2009. So they're trying to do the best with what they can in owning a business for 10 years or so. It may seem like a long time, but not that long for a big $1 billion business right there. Yeah. So I think it's also on the players as well. It's also kind of on the culture, I think. It's really hard to get in free agents or trade people in trades into Sacramento who want to come and play. Like Jason Terry came here a few years back. This is a long time ago, and he just didn't play. And I thought he was going to retire. And then he played like 5 more seasons. Same with Marco Bellinelli.
Yes.
Like all these guys come here and then they just like don't play. There's this like really negative connotation on Sacramento, and it's really. I think it's just like it's kind of a swirling blame game. It's a little bit of the owners, it's a little bit of Coach Walton. I mean, Coach Walton's not Greg Popovich. He's not a well-established coach who has all these accolades and all this time under his belt. So that's what I think also as well, where Coach Walton kind of got put in a bad situation is the Kings have a new ownership, relatively, really young players, a new GM. They did not need a new head coach. They needed someone like Alvin Gentry. I think he's a great stand-in in the interim role for this season right here. He's just a veteran who doesn't need to like think about what he's doing. He's already done it so many times. He's probably been just kind of like waiting in the wings just in case Walton got fired, and been able to open up his offense a little bit more. So I think it's just kind of a swirling blame game that kind of changes per day and kind of what the Kings fans feel that day. But I think it's things are going in the more positive direction now.
So
Casey,
speaking
go
of the
ahead.
free agents, I was going to say, do you think maybe the destination for Sacramento is part of because you have 4 teams in California, and right now they're basically the 4th best team option wise that you go to. The Clippers used to be probably not there, but the Kings have been out of the playoffs for just about 17 years. So I know they got some good building blocks right now with De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Halliburton. And I actually like Rashawn Holmes. I think he's a good player. But do you think maybe they just need to progress these guys in a couple of years now that they have these building blocks, so to speak, that'll attract free agents, you think?
Yeah, I think you said it correctly. I think that just building those building blocks, whether it's drafting good players, signing players like Vlade Divac's former GM signed Rashawn Holmes after he was on the Sixers and the Suns and was just, 7 minutes a game player here and there. And, obviously the Kings were not very good, so he had more time to develop like that. But that's kind of what they need to get, those hidden gems, and then kind of build up their respect throughout the league, which I think they're doing with players like Mo Harkless, Alex Len coming in, Tristan Thompson coming in, which aren't that big for, across the league names, but that's like Mo Harkless got in the face of Nurkic the other night against Portland. And that's something the Kings players would not do the last 15 years or so, They didn't care that much. They would kind of get walked over, but I think that they're kind of starting to get that identity and that kind of culture a little bit shifted more positively. But I still, what you're going back to in California, I'm a little biased. I think NorCal, especially the Valley right here, is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. I've been to 25 states. Besides Maui, I'd say that NorCal is pretty darn nice. But it's kind of, it's funny to see how people from, across the nation don't realize how far away and diversely different Sacramento and LA are, or even the Bay Area and Sacramento are.
Oh yeah.
So I think it just honestly takes coming here and showing them around and being like, hey, maybe I'll apply for a job, be the King's travel guide, and show them around the great breakfast coffee shops in the Sacramento area they can go to.
And the greatest way to get a free
Sorry.
agent is by winning, right? I mean, that's the greatest way to get a free agent. So who do you, I saw in your article, you kind of threw out a few possible coach names out there. Who you threw out maybe, or, Bobby Jackson, Doug Christie, maybe going after a few. I didn't realize Bobby Jackson was coaching their G League team. I always liked him on the Kings anyways. I always feel like that's part of the Kings' issue too. Is as a Warriors fan, the Warriors went through 17 years of just garbage in my life. I mean, just absolute garbage. Basically, what the Kings are going through right now, and they're just both. The similarity between both franchises to me is how inconsistent their front office is. They fire people too early, or they fire people too late. They make terrible draft decisions, and then they're not consistent with their thinking. They're always changing their style and stuff like that. You talked about them having good, decent building blocks as players, or does it matter though if the GM? I guess my question is there a head coach that can actually stabilize this? Is there anybody out there that can do that?
Yeah, so I'm kind of still on the fence about, or I'm not really sure what the direction for the head coach should be. I'm not sure. I think it all really depends on what the new GM Monte McNair has in his brain for what he wants the franchise to be, not just this year or 3 years from now, but 7 years from now, hopefully. I think there was a necessary element of bringing in former Kings loved players like Vlade Divac and Peja Stojakovic in the front office in the early days, because the Kings almost moved people in Sacramento who love them violently, were hating on them and not going to games, not supporting them, blah, blah, blah. So they needed to honestly resurrect the franchise and bring people back in. And so I think that definitely set them back win and loss wise and reputation wise across the league. But I think that with Monte McNair coming in, I'm hoping that Vivek Ranadive, I think former minority owner of the Golden State Warriors.
He was, yep.
Yep. And so I'm not sure if he was ever in your in your mind when he was with the Warriors, but I'd love to hear about that if he ever came up. But he's been seen as a meddling owner a lot, honestly, is what people say. And I mean, he does have $1 billion business that he wants to have a hand in. So I understand, if I owned an NBA franchise, I'd love to, interview the coach. That'd be awesome. But at the same time, you gotta, hire those
Yeah, you gotta let those guys.
GMs and people like that. So the best fit next year. I think that maybe in the future, Doug Christie could be a great head coach for the Kings or in the league. But I honestly think that the Kings need to roll with someone who is established, as like they have their culture, they have their stuff they're bringing in, and they're also willing to change a little bit, whether if that's like a top level college coach or some guy or woman that Monty McNair has been looking at on the bench of another team over the past couple seasons. The Kings do like to make a splash in the social world, and make some changes with that. Like they're at the head of, people buying tickets with Bitcoin and all that type of stuff. So as assistant coach, I think she still is Becky Hammond. So I could see them, definitely giving her a run as one of the first female coaches, head coaches in the league. But honestly, I think that, Coach Gentry, there's been talk that this interim role could extend farther on past this season. A funny story, or not a funny story, kind of a dark story actually, that kind of gives the Kings franchise, Kings ownership a little bit of a bad light on them, but I think they've changed since then. Back when Mike Malone was the head coach, Gentry was brought in to be one of the assistant coaches, like he has been for the last few years. And I heard this on the James Ham podcast. It's called The Kings Beat. He's one of the best Kings writers out there. The ownership came up to Gentry, and they told him straight up that they were going to fire Malone in 15 games, and that they wanted him to be the head coach, and that they were going to put all this stuff in his contract to make that happen. And he was like, whoa, we have like a fraternity of coaches here. I can't do that. He went and told Malone, and it kind of just set the Kings back for a few years.
That was a bad time right there.
I think that's changing though, and I think that veteran head coach, hopefully Gentry does well enough to do that. But I think that Monty McNair, Kings GM, has something up his sleeve, someone he's looking at, and I trust Monty McNair. So
that'd be interesting. Got Becky Hammond. That would not be bad at all. Speaking of, let's go to the players now. Let's shift to them a little bit more here. You got Fox, you got Halliburton, you got Mitchell, and you have Hield. That's kind of, to me, your four best players. Bagley, I got to put Bagley in his own situation. I kind of still think he's good. And we saw that a little bit last time in the Lakers game and a little bit in the Blazers game, but he's got to prove it to me for a longer period of time before I even put him in any mix of wanting to keep him. But I can see as a Kings fan, you would want to hold him because you don't want to get burned by that pick. But to me, the big four, the backcourt. But it's a weird big four. Like, I don't see how they can all be on the same team and be successful, because I guess I feel like the problem with the Kings, and I felt like they had this issue when they had Bogdanovic, who I liked, is they felt like they had too many guards. And then their players aren't getting enough playing time. And I don't know, it always feels weird to me. Like, I always felt that way with Bogdanovic. I'm like, why aren't they playing this guy more? Like, and then you realize they're bringing in these kind of guards, like, who's the guy now? The old veteran now. That's on who's on like the Raptors now or something like that. They're always bringing Temple. They're bringing Garrett Temple.
Garrett Temple, yeah.
They're bringing these random guys eating up playing time. And so, like, I feel like now they have the four young guys. Hield seems like to me, the guy out of the situation maybe, but I feel like he brings the most different look as a player. What do you think of those four players? Is there somebody I'm forgetting that you think is better than those four?
And just to, you kind of cut out at the beginning of that. So your four players were Fox, Halliburton, Hield, and Barnes?
Not Barnes and Mitchell.
Oh, Mitchell's gotcha. The four guards. Gotcha.
Yeah, because I don't see Barnes as a long-term King. Maybe a year.
Oh, interesting.
I don't see him. I don't know if he'll be traded, but I don't see him. When you guys start to have success, I don't know if I see him on that team. That's kind of.
I would love to hear more about that. Your view of Harrison Barnes especially as a former Warrior.
We can. Casey, why don't you take the first shot at that one?
It cost us a championship because he couldn't hit the finals.
He could hit a corner three, man.
But no, he is a good player. I think he's a real solid player. I think he's like on that in between all-star and just below that. I think you'll have games where he looks like an all-star and then have games where he just looks like a good NBA player. So I think that's the one thing my biggest critique was always about Barnes is he could never do it consistently throughout the whole season. He'd have 10 great games, and then he'd just be that 15-point type of game scorer, and he'd disappear through games. And then, so that was my biggest critique on him. But I like him. I think he's a solid mix for the group that they have right now, because I think you always have to have someone that's been there. He's won a championship, and to prove to guys, like Tyrese Halliburton, not necessarily Buddy Hield because he's been in the league for a little bit now, but De'Aaron Fox, show them kind of the championship pedigree. And I think he should be there for those years. He might be like more of a sixth man coming off the bench for them. I could see that. That would be really big, I think, to have that scoring, because there's one thing he can do. Now he can put the ball in the bucket. So that's where I'm with him.
So it sounds like
I love that.
Sounds like you like Harrison.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
so,
I like Barnes. I never hated him except in that finals, but that's the only time. But yeah, I think he's a solid player, though.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of those things you said right there. I put out an article yesterday actually about how Barnes is an elite role player, and he'll be like, the Kings will be better when he's their fourth or fifth best player, not their second or third best player. But exactly what you said, man. He'll have a game where he goes like 25, 8 and 8 with 7 of 9 from 3, and then he'll have 2 games in a row where he goes like 6 points, and you're like, what happened to Harrison Barnes? Did he I don't know, go out to dinner or something like that?
Yeah.
Hey, my dad's here. Just waved at him. What's up, Dad? I'm live on a podcast right now.
Nice.
Big Kings fan.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, he came down to watch the Kings and Niners game.
Nice.
So, but yeah, I think Harrison Barnes. Well, actually, to go back to your original question with the guard lineup, going a few years back when the Kings traded DeMarcus Cousins for Buddy Hield, Vivek is in love with Buddy Hield, loves that shooting aspect, loves Buddy Hield, and so I think that's what it is, that we kind of we Kingsed ourselves into overpaying for Buddy, because if we didn't overpay for Buddy when we needed to, back a few years ago when we originally signed him, we would have had nobody on the team. We would have had 0 stars. We couldn't have brought in another guy in free agency. So that's kind of hamstrung us over the next few years. Whereas Bogdanovich probably would have been a better option, versatility wise, for a playoff team or a hopeful playoff team. But it seems like all coaches that we've had, including Gentry, and opposing coaches, still respect the hell out of Buddy Hield, especially at the end of games. They put their best defender on him. They deny him the ball. They don't want Buddy Hield to beat them, essentially. And so I think that the Kings have a good thing in that, and that also his contract is going down over the next few years. Same with Barnes, which is nice.
That's true.
Which will hopefully allow them to kind of, it's kind of like that thing like in the NFL where you're like, well, you're paying that first round running back a lot of money, but the third round guy is doing a lot better, but you should probably play that first round guy. It's like that kind of mindset of okay, well, Buddy Hield can be the best sixth man in the league, which I've written articles about as well, which he's finally in that role right there, and kind of embracing it and not talking bad about it. But I think that the Kings are going to be able to either trade one of those guys or kind of mix and match them in the new NBA kind of style if they are able to make the rest of their lineup a little bit bigger. Now, the only wing they have right now truly is Harrison Barnes. They need another guy kind of like that to complement that 4-guard lineup. Whereas Tyrese Halliburton can play point guard or off the ball. With De'Aaron Fox, they're kind of starting to mesh a little bit more. And I think the mindset with Davion Mitchell is that he'll be able to get plugged and played anywhere, essentially guard, 1 through 3 or 4 at the end of games or during the middle of games, whether it's with Fox, without Fox, with Halliburton, whatever that may be. So I think they're kind of trying to formulate a little menagerie, I guess, of how to use those guards while also being oh, hey, you want to trade us this guy for Buddy Hield? Sure, let's do it. We have a lot of guards. And so I think they're just keeping their options open is what's going down here. But they definitely need another wing because they are lacking size out there, especially with Rashawn Holmes at center. He's not that big for center, and he can't really stretch the floor enough at 4. So the Kings are kind of in a weird – they have a weird depth chart. They're very deep, but I think they definitely need to shuffle some things up.
I saw they put Bagley on LeBron a little bit last game. It'd be interesting if they started using him a little bit more as like maybe not a wing defender, but just maybe against certain matchups. If they got something from him, that changes their whole entire rotation. I always feel.
Man, you're totally right. If he can, the reason why he's been sitting out is because he can't play defense. He's been shown just to be he is on an island on defense. He actually stayed down the other night. He didn't go for a bunch of shot fakes. It was shocking. It was literally shocking on LeBron. Like LeBron came up to him after the game. When they all dap each other up, and he came up to Bagley first. And so when Bagley hasn't been injured over his career, he's averaged 15 and 7, which whatever, he's a second overall pick, whatever. I still took a guy who is averaging 15 and 7 and can hit a corner three that he's been shown to progressively have more confidence in over the last few years. I don't really know how to quantify Bagley's career. But it seems like he's going to get a little bit more run coming up. No, definitely not. He has a great second jumping ability, though. Don't forget about that.
I thought
sometimes to me, those numbers aren't really based upon the player. Sometimes that's the organization taking him where he probably shouldn't have gone. He had the talent maybe as a second overall, but in reality, you just look at it a few years. Yeah, I know health has been a concern, but sometimes it's just not your fault. It's where you're taking it. And, expectations are through the roof when you're a top 5, top 3 pick. And I just don't think he was. I don't think he was that good coming out, to be honest. I didn't see it enough.
I always felt it didn't help him. Luka got taken right after. Just from the fact that you're like, oh dang it, they got this guy right after you. That's like a sure Hall of Famer for sure. Tom, I got one big question for you, and then hopefully we can take just a quick little break here that I can get you on for our usual eight question bonanza here. We'll go quick with it. I guess the question it comes down to for the Kings, and the reality is, we talked about the players, we talked about the ownership, we talked about McNair with the GM coming in with a new philosophy. They got a new coach. Kind of have they have a veteran coach right now, like you said, Gentry. Does this team make the top 10?
Yes, I think they do. I think they make the top 10. I think that they put themselves in a position to really make a team sweat and not want to lose to those Kings in the play-in round. Also, I may or may not have put $100 on the Kings making the playoffs this year. To make this and I actually pulled it together with 2 other buddies, so we put $300 on it. Money where your mouth is, baby. Where you at, Carmichael Dave? But yeah, I think the Kings make the 10th seed. I think that there's enough teams below them in the league or in the Western Conference, and I think that they'll supersede one of those teams in the 10th and below.
Yeah, I'm looking at the standings right now. It looks like maybe Minnesota. There's always injuries. That's what usually causes these things to change a little bit. So it'll be interesting with Memphis and Minnesota what happens. All right, so Kings make the playoffs. Let's take just a quick break here. We'll be right back with Tom. We'll finish it out with some Kings questions I got for him here. All right, we're back here. Final segment here of the podcast. Tom, thanks again for joining us. Appreciate your time, giving us your insight here on the Kings, the Sacramento Kings. A lot going on with them. The Kings are a weird franchise, being an hour and a half away from them. They're not on TV locally here, but I've always read about them, always hearing about them. And they were really good when I was in high school. Really good when I was in high school, to the point where they would just destroy the Warriors and just make them. They would beat them by 50. I remember a game on a Sunday afternoon. Casey, I remember, or Monday. It was Martin Luther King Day. We were really excited. They played a 1:00 game. You guys had Jay Will, and I think you guys ran us by 40 by halftime. It was just ridiculous. Yeah, it was that.
Let's go.
Tyler, who wasn't able to make the podcast, had a question for you, so I'll start out with him. Do you feel now, I guess his question is, now as a Kings fan, looking at the Warriors' success, are you a fan of the Warriors, or you kind of look at them the way we kind of looked at the Kings, like we just kind of hated them because they would just beat up on our team? Or do you kind of look at them with a little bit more respect? Or we're just curious how you view the Warriors as a Kings fan.
Well, I think that Steph Curry, I'd say, besides Steph Curry and Dame Lillard are probably my 2 favorite non-Kings in the NBA. So I think that Steph Curry and Klay Thompson really make that for me. But I like the Warriors. I tried to write an article about why the Kings and Warriors should have a rivalry, blah blah blah, and I got through it and I was like, this just turns into why we should band together and hate the Lakers together. But yeah, I like the Warriors. I loved like the early 2000s Warriors. I had a bunch of friends who were fans for the We Believe days. Like my friends bought some tickets for the nosebleeds up in whatever Oracle was called, the arena in Oakland for one of those games. And they were like, man, we were scared for our lives up there with some like real Oakland dudes. It was just some great stories. Like my friends and I'm not sure, you guys are Bay Area dudes. I'm not sure if you ever watched the YouTube sensation back in the day, Ghost Ride the Volvo, where it's like this video where these dudes ghost rided their Volvo because the A's were going to move. So we made a parody video to that because the Warriors didn't, or they traded J Rich, I think. I don't know. So I got love for the Warriors. I got love for Adonal Foyle and Chris
Foyle,
Nolan.
Yeah, the name. I like that name.
Yeah.
Is that there?
Yeah, baby.
All right, so
Okay.
you got, yeah, exactly. So you got no. Yeah, I to me, it's still kind of crazy they've never met in the playoffs. That'd be pretty fun if they ever met in the playoffs. I mean, you can't really have a rivalry if you've never played in the playoffs. You know, that really comes down to it, right? So until we actually play in the playoffs, if one of our teams lose to the other, yeah, then we can't have a rivalry. So that would be fun if that ever happened. It's just
that would
amazing.
be very fun.
It's amazing to me it's never happened. It just shows you how. I mean, two teams, right? The Warriors have a 17-year gap with no playoffs. I mean, it's just crazy how that works.
Yeah, we can meet in the middle at the Nut Tree in Vacaville and host a Kings Warriors watch party.
Yes, now we're talking the Nut Tree. I was like seeing that.
Hey, if the Kings make the playoffs, 1-8, that could be Warriors Kings, baby.
There we go. There you go.
A couple of years ago, when the Kings had Dave Yeager as their head coach, I remember they played the Dubs in the last game of the season. This is before the play-in. The Kings were the 9th seed for a couple of years, and Draymond said after the game, "Man, these Kings don't give up. I would not want to play them in a 7-game series." So
that's enough, brother.
That's enough, baby. I'll hang my hat on that for next 10 years.
That's all right. We used to be there with I've said it many times here with the great timeout era of Warriors basketball.
Yeah.
We used to hang our hat on.
The great timeout. My grandparents lived in Walnut Creek, so I would go often, and Warriors games would be on. I love the great sounds of Bob Fitzgerald over the TV. So
those Eric Dampier's shoulders. What could you say?
Eric Dampier, gotta love that, baby.
What's a random Kings player that you kind of like, or you kind of think of like, Scott Pollard to me is a little bit better than random. So is there anybody kind of below that, kind of like that kind of era that you like?
So one of my favorites is Pooh Jeter. Not many. Yeah. So he was a Kings point guard back in like the DeMarcus Cousins days, and I was doing a little article recently on some G League stuff because Kings fans love Harry Giles III from Duke, and he's been making some noise in the G League. And I was looking at the roster, doing a little game preview, and on that roster is Pooh Jeter, and he's like a hooper. Hasn't been in the NBA in a few years. Probably played on like the 2015 Kings. But Pooh Jeter. No one else will know him besides Kings fans. So hopefully someone listens to this and makes it this far in to hear the Pooh Jeter shout out. Eugene Pooh Jeter.
Eugene, Casey. I think or at least my favorite random King player is. He wasn't random in college though. But on the Kings he was Mateen Cleaves. He was always
Cleaves, you gotta love it.
He was always the bench rider there. He was always talking smack on the bench. He never did anything, but he talked a lot of smack on the bench.
I was like Hito Turkoglu.
Yeah,
Hito. Hito would have been another guy if they would have kept him and Gerald Wallace. They would have had two, perennial all-stars almost on their team. A wealth of small forwards.
Hito was like one of the only Kings, but he